I think by every stretch of imagination, it's turned out to be an extremely successful visit. So, and I think the Chinese have this fear that if there is any country that can outclass them, it is India. This is a relationship that everybody is looking out for. The visit of Prime Minister Modi to the United States was much anticipated, and frankly, it has lived up to all the hype which was surrounding the visit. I think by every stretch of imagination, it's turned out to be an extremely successful visit. Not just the optics which was surrounding the visit, the pomp and the pageantry, but also the body language of not just the two principals who seem to be extremely comfortable in each other's company, but also the way other members of the American system, especially when Mr. Modi addressed the U.S. Congress, the body language of U.S. congressmen and congresswomen, the body language of the officials who were aiding the two principals, everything suggested that what is now being billed as the most consequential relationship of the 21st century, that's lived up to the kind of billing that's been given to this relationship. It's very clear that Mr. Modi and Mr. Biden have started taking this relationship to the next level. To my mind, there has been a very long effort which has been made in building up this relationship between India and the United States, which a former American ambassador, not to India, but a former US diplomat had once called the two estranged democracies. And now it is being said that these are two engaged democracies. But I think it's much more than just engagement, which is taking place between India and the United States. It's very clear that the first really big change where some degree of trust developed between India and the United States was at the time of the Kargil conflict with Pakistan. The role that the US side played at that point of time, giving a dressing down to the Pakistanis, not backing them, asking them to withdraw if they wanted any kind of intervention, I think was what established the first bit of trust between the two countries. This was followed by the next level, which was taken during the time of Dr. Manmohan Singh, when the nuclear deal was signed. Subsequently, of course, we shot ourselves in the foot because we couldn't really take that nuclear deal to the extent that we should have. But even then, I think it did establish this trust between the two sides. It enhanced the trust. There was a lot more that started happening between both the countries, including in the field of India buying weapons from and weapon platforms from the United States. So despite the fact that the nuclear deal did not lead to all that was being spoken about, it did catapult the relationship to the next level. After that, there's been a slow and steady progress, but I think, and I guess I'm not the only one, I think there's a general consensus that this particular visit is now catapulting this relationship to the next level again. You just need to look at the joint statement that has been signed between India and the United States. It's almost 6,500 words. It's almost like a paper, an academic paper, if you will. And the sheer breadth and depth of the engagement which is taking place between the two countries, and I'll use that old cliche of the largest democracy and the strongest democracy or the oldest democracy in the world. I think the joint statement manifests is a manifestation of the kind of depth which is coming into this relationship, the kind of trust which is coming into this relationship. The fact of the matter is that if you look at the joint statement, from space to strategic affairs, from education to energy, from telecom to emerging technologies, on virtually everything, the two sides are cooperating, are talking about co-development, and a range of issues now. So I think this is something which, if you had looked, 25 years back, I don't think we could have ever imagined that India and the United States will reach at this stage in the bilateral relationship. There are some very important and very pivotal deals that have been signed. One is, of course, of the jet engines. The deal is still to be finalized, but I think the memorandum of understanding which has been signed makes it very clear that these engines are going to be manufactured in India. There would be some last minute things which need to be settled, certain things which will need to be worked out, and that will happen. And I think that will happen sooner rather than later. But on the business side of the visit, I think the kind of investments that we have managed to attract, for example, the plant that is being set up in Gujarat by Micron, that is significant. The fact that Applied Materials, another huge American company, is coming in and is talking about training engineers and co-development is yet another very important achievement of this visit. Mr. Modi, every time he has gone to the United States, has taken a lot of trouble to engage with American business leaders, and this time, although I'm afraid that Elon Musk is likely to be cancelled by the usual suspects, not that he gives a damn about it, but when Elon Musk says that he is a fan of Mr. Modi, I think that's going to get him cancelled in many circles, which I imagine he would revel getting cancelled by those circles. But engaging with him, engaging with a range of other American business leaders, I think is something which is extremely important, because the relationship is not just centered around the strategic and the security side of things. That's very important, of course, but I think between India and the United States, there is a very important economic dimension which exists and which has enormous potential, perhaps a potential which can outdo the economic relationship between the United States and China. Now, of course, the Chinese have been writing all kinds of nonsensical stuff about how far the India-U.S. relationship can go. The Chinese, with their typical sneering arrogance and their inferiority, which is reflected in their Middle Kingdom complex, which they have been trying to talk down at India, trying to show India as somebody who cannot catch up. But let's talk about what China was in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s, when they were latching on to the American coattails and trying to modernize. Now, of course, we can never do what the Chinese did. We cannot butcher people the way the Chinese do. We cannot bulldoze through entire cities to set up new cities or set up new plants, to take people's land without paying them compensation. We cannot do all the stuff which a totalitarian and authoritarian state like China can do. But even then, I think everybody in the world recognizes India's potential, and certainly the Americans do. So the Chinese, before they start pointing fingers at India, need to look where they were when they started their process of modernization and reform, and we are far ahead of them. So And I think the Chinese have this fear that if there is any country that can outclass them, it is India, and they will try and do everything to stop India's rise. So the fact is that there is this security and strategic dimension which is pulling India and the United States together. There is an economic dimension to this relationship, and of course there is the ideological dimension, if you will, which is basically that both countries are democracies, both countries are pluralistic in their outlook. They have a similar worldview, which if you just look at the joint statement that has been signed, comes out quite clearly. And these are the three pillars of the engagement that is taking place between India and the United States. Of course, the C word, that is China, is always lurking in the background, and the C word also fits in to these three pillars which are bringing India and the United States closer. There is a security and strategic dimension which is related to China. There is an economic dimension, that the dependence of the world, which had sleepwalked into giving the Chinese control over supply chains and has now been rudely woken up by China's belligerence, its aggression, its encroachment into other countries' territories, the way it is trying to upend the international system, the way it's violating the rules-based order, all of that, I think that fits in very well both with the worldview part of the India-US relationship, as well as with the economic relationship which is building up between the two countries. So the China factor is there. Now many people, of course, will say that the China factor is the only factor which is bringing India and the United States closer. And I think that is utter nonsense, because the fact of the matter remains that American interest in India long preceded their fear of China. In fact, the Americans and the Indians were making efforts to put this relationship back on the rails and build on this relationship long before the Americans started looking at China as a threat. And I would go back to around the 80s when the first real move starts to build up this relationship. It started small, but a lot of effort was made across governments, across political parties, people, and in a sense there was a bipartisan consensus, not just in the United States but also in India. And this relationship was trying to be built up independent of the Chinese and their rise, or of Russia, or of any other country. So there was an intrinsic value which both countries found in this relationship. In fact, when you look at when President Obama came into power, the Americans were even talking about a G2 with China, but even at that point of time their relationship with India was only growing. The important thing out here is that just like the Indians who were sleepwalking into believing that China's rise is going to be peaceful, that China will be this benign neighbor, the Americans felt the same way. There was this touching faith in many American policymakers that as China grew, as it became richer, as it became more prosperous, as its engagement with the rest of the world increased, China would conform to the rules-based system which was there. It would become much more liberal in its politics. It would not pose a threat to international peace. All of those assumptions, however, have proved to be untrue. So yes, today there is a China factor which is in a sense working like a shot in the arm to the relationship between India and the United States. But like I said, it is something which added on to bringing the two sides closer. It is not the only factor which brought the two sides closer. other factor which has caused some problems between India and the United States, at least among the usual suspects who have been critical or who have been skeptical about the relationship between India and the United States, is Russia. But even there, I think there is a recognition among at least the responsible and the serious people in the United States at the policy making level, that apart from India's own compulsions in maintaining its relationship with Russia, I think India has also done a favor to the world in terms of stabilizing the energy markets by buying Russian oil. So there is this recognition which has also come in, and frankly, given the fact that both India and the United States are big countries, India is not one of the normal smaller countries which the US has been dealing with, which have been alliance partners of the United States. India cannot be expected to play the role of a small country which casts all its entire lot with one big country, even if that country is a superpower. India will have engagements with other countries. There will be many areas of convergences between India and the United States, which is very clear that they are there, and there will be some areas of divergences as well. Now, the unfortunate part is that there are all kinds of people, because both are very raucous democracies, very noisy. There are some people who have these doubts on how far the two countries will get into this embrace with each other. Now, frankly, I think there is no alliance as yet between India and the United States, but the partnership is going from strength to strength. And what is important is that at the policy making level, at the people who actually call the shots, they have not let the noise which is being made by the usual suspects, the woke media and other deracinated folk, for example, in India. They have not allowed that noise to impact on building up the relationship between the two countries. And I think that is something which stands as testimony to the strength which underlies this engagement which is taking place between the two countries. This is a relationship which is certainly going to be pivotal. From an Indian point of view, my own sense is that, and this is an analogy I've used earlier, in the old days when you used to play field hockey, there used to be something called the D. You had to take the ball up to the D, into the D, and then you could, take a shot at the goal and score a goal. The rules have changed now, but I think the mentality of the Indians in many ways is still that we are very good at taking the ball into the D. But when it comes to converting that opportunity into a goal, somewhere we start lagging, whether it's on the policy framework or it's in coordination. There is something which just does not take us to scoring the goal. And I think it is important that this time the opportunities that have been created with this visit, we ensure that we score the goals which we went to the United States to score. And of course, it was a mutual kind of a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think it is important that we put in place the policies, we put in place the coordination and the cooperation which will fructify all the potential and the promises which are in the joint statement and which will take this relationship again to the next level. Who knows what that might be? It could be an alliance, it could be something else, it could be something even bigger than an alliance, who knows. But I think this is a relationship that everybody is looking out for. It's spooking many people. It certainly is spooking the Chinese. There are these hysterics which are coming out from the Chinese, including from their former foreign minister Wang Yi, and from some of the others, the usual trolls which they have in their media, and of course their lackeys in Pakistan, who have a lot of disquiet, at this growing relationship between India and the United States, especially the reference to Pakistani terrorism and Pakistan as an epicenter of terrorism. An extremely successful visit by Prime Minister Modi, but now the real hard work has to come so that we take this relationship to the potential which underlies this engagement which is taking place.